Who am I?
Richard Kazimer, media veteran.
Why I got in radio is because I'm good with a knife.
Contributor in Perth, Australia.
Our friend Richard Kazimer in the United States.
How are you guys enjoying the 19th century? Is that working out for you? How can you say, I'm not making fun of you as a race, I'm making fun of you as black performers?
I think as a country, Americans are as patriotic as the most rabid UK football hooligan.
Who am I?
Richard S. Kazimer.
Balls Radio with Phil Dobbie.
Richard Kazimer is on the line from the United States. So we've been talking about the weather in the UK, Richard. I mean, you've got snow, lots of snow over there, but you're sort of used to that, particularly where you are. Tell us whereabouts in the United States you are.
Yes, I'm in Massachusetts. I'm about 10 miles northeast of Boston. Right. So I'm right in the thick of it all. I actually grew up in Maine, which is the northernmost state. So I'm used to this New England weather. So winters are just par for the course for me. Although the past, I'd say 10 years or so, we've had much milder winters than we're getting now. And the difference is that, they were steady storms all through the winter. In the past decade or so, again, directly related to climate change, is that you'll get maybe one or two storms during the winter, and then the temperature's at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is unheard of here in New England. But now we're getting some severe weather, which a lot of us old timers are going, well, we've seen that before when the dinosaurs roamed the earth when we were young. But it's the thing about the weather is that it's the great equalizer because it affects everybody the same way, exactly. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, well, we've just been talking to my brother in the UK though, who's saying that the weather, because the weather is pretty bad over there as well with the water everywhere. But it's only now the water has hit the home counties that the politicians have actually decided there. So it's it has to affect the well-off before they do it.
Oh yes,
of course. So it's not such a great equalizer, perhaps. No, look, the reason I asked where you live is apart from just mild curiosity, because we had a lot of emails with people saying, listen to that Kazimer character. Can you tell us where he lives, the precise address, and what time he's normally home? So I don't know if you've been upsetting a few people, perhaps. But look, people aren't going to worry about the weather today because isn't it a day off? Isn't Monday a public holiday? Isn't it your President's Day today?
President's Day, that's one of those things where they put together the George Washington's birthday, Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and whoever else they can throw into the mix. And instead of celebrating each president's birthday, they decided to make it one day, which is a Monday, which is a sales day. So a lot of these are just for retailers. This is the day that George Washington bought his first car, apparently, according to the advertisements.
Interesting facts about U.S. presidents, because, of course, this will surprise a lot of people, but we do research for this program. Ulysses S. Grant, when was he? When was he president, roughly?
Just after the Civil War.
He got a speed...
Let me tell you this, Phil. I have no concept of time or dimension. I don't know when my birthday is.
Right.
Don't ask me specifics, but it was 1800.
Right. Well, he got a speeding ticket for riding his horse too fast. Did you know that, or is this breaking news for you?
Knowing U.S. Grant the way I do, it was probably drunk driving as well.
Was it on a horse? And Millard Fillmore, the first president to have a bathtub installed in the White House. And he was president number 13. It wouldn't have been very pleasant going to visit the president up to that point, would it? I wouldn't have thought.
No, he's wasn't he a big man as well?
Oh, was he? All right. Oh.
I think he was very fat.
Okay, well, he probably needed it then. He started to smell out the place, and they thought, God, it's time we got a bathtub in this place. So there we are, just interesting facts for President's Day. We try our hardest for you, Richard. So, look, I found an interesting piece in the New York Times this week, which I was a little bit aghast at. I know, and we touched on this last week. The idea, of course, that Barack Obama is trying to lift the minimum wage. The minimum wage here in Australia is $16.37, or if you're doing casual work, it's $20, which is about $18.30 in US dollars. The minimum wage in the US, $8 per hour? Have I got that right?
No, you don't. It's actually $7.25 an hour.
Wow.
Different states can set their minimum wage higher or lower than the national minimum wage. And what Barack Obama is trying to do is to raise the national minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour. Can you imagine trying to tell an Australian worker to work for $7.25 an hour?
Yeah, they just wouldn't do it. Well, they wouldn't do it, but they wouldn't do it for 10 either. I mean, it's sort of like it's a big leap from 7 to 10. I mean, that's quite a quantum leap. I mean, which means it's politically very difficult, but the result is still pretty bad, isn't it?
he's doing this because there is a necessity, because you cannot live on $7.25 an hour. You can't even live on, $8.50 an hour. So what he's trying to do is get that up to $10.10, which is, acceptable and realistic. He actually has already done that. He raised the minimum wage for federal contractors through executive action to $10 an hour. And what executive action is that a president has authority to sign into legislation without having to go through the House and the Congress. Now, presidents do this sparingly so that they don't have to look like, a dictator. But he did that for federal contractors, and now he's trying to raise the national minimum wage to $10.10 through the House and the Senate. And, of course, the Republicans are against it because they're all pro-business, and all the business owners don't want to pay their employees any more than they have to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as we said last week, starve to death, and we move on to the next one. But
Chris Rock has a great line, the comedian Chris Rock, where an employer would say, "I would like to pay you less, but by law I have to pay you the minimum."
And that's the truth. It's yes. And it works out at an annual income of about 16 grand a year at the moment. So I don't know what that's going to push it up to 18 or 19 grand a year if you work 40 hours a week every week, no sick days, no holidays. And out of that, what I can't believe is then the government takes tax out of that. So looking at these figures in the New York Times, if you're on 16 grand, they're going to take about $1,500 of that on federal tax.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So it works out you're working 40 hours and you're earning like $270 a week or something like that. And I don't know how much you pay on rent, and that's the idea of this New York Times story. They've got a calculator, so it says, take out your rent, take out your health insurance, assuming you want to live, take out the food, all your other expenses, and just find out how much your debt is accumulated each week, because there's nowhere in the world you can live on $278 a week. As
you go across the country, we have 48 contiguous states, and then you have Alaska and Hawaii to make up the 50 states. So here in the United States, 4 states have a minimum wage lower than the federal minimum wage. How they got around doing that to pay employees less than $7.25 is anyone's guess. There are 21 states plus Washington, D.C. that have a higher minimum wage. 20 states have a minimum wage requirement that's the same as the minimum wage. 5 states don't have any minimum wage requirement at all, so they just do whatever they want. State of Washington has the highest at $9.32 an hour, and Georgia and Wyoming have the lowest at $5.15. 10 of the states, mind you, now this is kind of a good thing, is that they base their minimum wage on the consumer price index. So as the cost of living goes up, those states will automatically increase incrementally their minimum wage, which usually takes place in January.
Right. It's still too low, though. I mean,
it's too low. It is.
Yeah, they still can't afford to buy anything, but at least they feel as though it's not getting out of, it's like looking at somewhere far, 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 far in the distance you're never going to reach. At least it stays that far in the distance. It's not getting further away. So at least you've still got hope. Maybe that's the idea. But this is not just 1 or 2 people. This is 4.8 million people in the United States, according to the New York Times, are on minimum wage. 4.8 million people living this hand-to-mouth existence.
Exactly. And when you figure out how many millions of people in the United States are living below the poverty level that still have full-time jobs, it's appalling.
Yeah. You can't use that, they're too lazy, they could get themselves a job excuse. That's for sure. They're just not smart enough to get a better job. Maybe it gets back to education. Who knows? I don't know. Fact is, someone's got to do these jobs, of course. I don't know how you solve the problem.
The biggest growth industries here in the United States are the service industries. So you have people in the food service and janitors and custodial work and retail workers. That's the largest growth job market here in the United States, and those traditionally pay the lowest amount of income. But you can there's just so many people that can work at a fast food joint. Now the right will say people who work in fast food, for example, those are really high school workers, when it's not. The median age for people working in fast food is 27 to 29 years old, far from being high school kids. Yeah. This is where people are going who have lost their jobs in the high-tech industries and whatnot, degreed professionals. They're working those jobs just to make ends meet. So it's no longer that the kids are only going to work there for the summer and then they go back to school. That's not the way it is.
Yeah, a lot of them probably ex-country town radio station announcers as well. They've probably found their way into the fast food joints.
You've read my resume then.
We've all been there. Let's look at gay marriage, because I'm confused by this. Legal or not? Legal or not? I'm not legal or not in the United States. In some states it is, and from what I can see, some are saying we're a little bit undecided. Others have said we're specifically banning it, by law. Others have gone further by writing it into their constitution. They are so uptight about the idea that two people who love each other might want to marry.
I live in Massachusetts, as I said, and this is the first state in the country that actually legalized marriage for same-sex couples. There are 17 states in the United States where same-sex couples are allowed to marry. In 21 other states, the states will actually give you some sort of recognition for the union. Now, there's a difference between marriage and civil unions.
Yeah.
And so there were states that allow it, states that won't allow marriage but do recognize civil unions, and then there are states that flat out say absolutely not. If you get married in one state that allows same-sex marriage and then you move to a state that doesn't allow it, your marriage is not recognized. Now, the debate of people who are opposed to same-sex marriage will say, what does it matter? Why do you need to change the Constitution, the state's Constitution, not the federal Constitution or the national Constitution? Yeah. Why do you need to do that when you can just live together and everything is fine? Well, when you're talking about long-term relationships, that means health benefits, inheritance, custody, just on and on, the same things that married couples, heterosexual couples experience. And to deny that is just abjectly wrong. So that's the big issue here in the United States.
Aren't some people trying to change the constitutions in their states the other way to say, well, look, before they get a chance to do that, let's rewrite the constitution so it's perfectly clear that we won't allow it?
Yes, they are. And states are actually doing that. Now, what happens is that those states that do it, or those states where, for example, same-sex marriage has been approved by the voters, someone can then come out and then sue that state and say no, and then it's overturned, and then it goes to the federal courts, and the federal courts overturn that. So we are a litigious society. When we're not shooting each other, we're taking each other to court. So it just goes around and around. I'm
not sure which is worse, but I love this federal court judge in Virginia who has overturned the state's ban, basically saying that every citizen should be able to should make their own choices free from unwarranted government interference. And they've taken the example as a precedent for this, going back to 1967. So until 1967, in Virginia, interracial marriage was illegal. That seems relatively recent to me. Certainly well within my lifetime, that interracial marriage was illegal in Virginia, and then there was a ruling that placed a ban on that, and now they're using that as the precedent to say, the same thing applies. Interracial marriage or same-sex marriage, it's the same thing. Why is the government interfering in marriage? Let's use this as a precedent to overturn the ban that this state's had. So a court of law is taking on the state. That's in a healthy direction. That's good to see. Have you been following that story?
Yes, and there's another one that's even more disturbing, is that in Kansas, the House of Representatives wants to change the language to actually legally discriminate against gender and not just sex. So their Constitution is going to allow an employer to discriminate against male or female on their gender if that employer's strict religious convictions find fault with that employee's lifestyle out of the workplace. So if you have two women, whether they're gay or heterosexual, are single and living together and raising children, that employer can then say, it looks gay to me, you're fired. Same thing with two men living together. Whatever. It's just such a broad brush to impose these religious convictions onto everyone's life. And that's why you see a lot of people moving from these, particularly red states or southern states, where it's the Bible Belt, to the more progressive Northeast or the Pacific Northwest.
Well, things are progressing. You now have an NFL player who has come out and said, I'm gay. even though reading the newspaper reports, his dad isn't perhaps so proud to hear this. Well, this is when I say reading the news reports, I'm reading Fox News. So, I mean, take that with a pinch of salt. But I can't believe that it's big news that you've got a gay NFL player. I mean, what they reckon 1 in 10 people are gay. So why wouldn't NFL players be?
Well, I think that
why is this so
what's
surprising?
happened is the person we're talking about is his name is Michael Sam Jr. He's an American football defensive end. He went to the University of Missouri. He's probably the 3rd or 4th top pick in the National Football League draft. And what that is that every year in the off season, the NFL teams get to pick the top players from colleges. And what may have been a preemptive public relations move on Sam's part is that he announced this before the NFL draft. And what I think is that perhaps if someone knew this and was going to come out and expose it, which is a great thing on his part and his handler's part to actually come out. Now, he is, what they're saying is that he's the first admittedly gay player in the NFL, which is not to say he's the only one. Of course he's not the only one. But for him to do this now, that could potentially affect what team he goes to if he gets picked at all. And of course he will, because he's that good. I think is a bold move on his part. Getting back to what you said about his father not supporting him, that is abjectly false. His father has been misquoted in the press.
Right.
His father has recently told, I think that one of the newspapers in Galveston, Texas, that he's in full support of his son, saying his son did the right thing and that he loves his son unconditionally.
You're
so
right.
There is that.
You're right. Well, it's strange, isn't it, the media getting stuff like that wrong? Imagine. Anyway, let's move on. Finally, you're John Kerry. You're foreign minister travelling around Southeast Asia at the moment, but he's not coming to Australia. What's wrong with us here? We're offended by this. He's in Indonesia. He's been to many other parts as well. Why has he not come down to Australia? Why are we off the agenda? Tell us what's going on.
Probably he just thinks that Australia and the U.S. are so copacetic that there's really no need to go down there. It could go back to the Heinz ketchup issue from a few years back. Didn't they pull out of Australia or something?
Oh, there's loads of things. Well, General Motors is pulling out of Australia as well, so maybe maybe he's a bit scared to come down here. Also, I note he's talking about climate change. He's travelling around Southeast Asia talking about climate change. So he's probably decided, well, there's no point. We know the position down there. There's no point in going down there to talk about it.
If I see him, I'll let him know.
Yeah, tell him we're a bit upset, but not very upset. Good to talk, Richard. Talk to you again next week.
All right, Phil. Take care.
Balls Radio with Phil Dobbie.